Hello, everyone. This is Damien Borba. Really excited to meet my old friend, Alec Saunders here. Thank you so much, Alec, for joining our podcast.
Well, thank you. And who are you calling old? Anyway,
Old friends. Yeah, no,
good to
this is. Uh, I am so happy that you're here and you accepted this. As I said before we went live, this is something that I hope to use all the knowledge that people that I admire that really mentored me way back and really took me to a better place. Then I can compile all that into a book or something for my kids so they can navigate life with some very powerful tools from people that did really well. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe a summary of your life, because you did so much and so well, and of course you had ups and downs, and just a little bit of you for the audience to get to know you.
yeah. So I'm Canadian. I was born in a place called Orillia in Ontario, in southern Ontario. And Orillia is a sort of a sleepy little cottage town on the shores of Lake Couchiching, which is where my dad was a high school teacher. And we lived there for a few years. Beautiful place. I've been back since, but in 1971 we left. Aurelia had my dad was a little bit frightened by the what he saw. He was a high school teacher. What he saw, the amount of drugs that he saw in the high schools, and so we moved to Ottawa, Canada's capital city. Grew up there, went to some really great schools. My love of music, and you know that how much I love music, really was kindled in Ottawa. I sang in choirs, I played in bands, did a bunch of different things. Tried out for symphonies, all sorts of things along those lines. And it was a great place to grow up as a kid. Along the way, I discovered computers, and I always was fascinated by math. I mean, it was kind of hard, but at the same time, when you solved the problem, it was a good feeling. And the one thing about math is that, at least at the time, and I know this isn't quite true anymore once you've done some more advanced work in math, but it seemed like there were right answers and wrong answers. And so the whole thing about mathematics and ultimately computers just attracted to me to it, because there were outcomes that were predictable, and it was a creative process, and it was something like the music that I really loved. And boy, that just seemed to be really engaging. And it was the very beginning of what would be the personal computer revolution. The very first pieces of software I wrote were for the old chiclet keyboard, which I doubt any of your viewers have ever seen, on the Commodore PET, the very first Commodore PETs.
Wow.
Ancient stuff. So anyway, I went away to university and I studied computer science. They were still teaching COBOL back in the day when I graduated. I met my first wife there. We had a family. I ended up working for a bunch of small companies, startup-y kind of companies in the late 80s, after graduating from university, and then ended up at Microsoft.
Nice.
And in 92, I went to Microsoft Canada. In 94, I went to Redmond, lived in Redmond for, I don't know, 7 years. In 2001, came back. But during those 7 years, they were really formative years for me from a career and life experience perspective, because the West Coast taught me that anything is possible, that you should, give it a shot. And growing up in sleepy little Ottawa, a government town, I love Ottawa. It's a beautiful place, but because it's a government town, there's always a question of, well, should we think about this first? Should we do this first? Do we have enough information to make this decision? And the West Coast of the United States and the computer industry is all about, yeah, I think we got enough information. Let's go give it a shot. And that was just really appealing. And I learned how to
Freedom.
solve
It was freedom.
problems.
Yeah.
Yeah. I learned how to solve problems in chunks at that point, and
Yeah.
instead of trying to solve the whole problem, and so on. And along the way, I was Microsoft's very first product manager for Windows on the internet. So
Wow.
you can love me or hate me, but I was the product manager for Internet Explorer uh, in the very beginning. And I worked on our early accessibility disability efforts. I worked on our early embedded stuff. I ran a product planning team that built the plans that ultimately became the Windows Phone back in the late 90s. So a lot of really cool cutting edge stuff. I mean, home networks. I built a analysis at one point of how likely it would be that people would have networks in their homes, because networks were a pretty uncommon idea. They were a business thing. And I said, yeah, no, everybody's going to have a network, and everything is going to be networked together. We did a demo in 2000 at CES of a networked barbecue, which everybody thought was crazy. We put a network card inside a barbecue, and you know what? Out on my deck right now, I have a barbecue with a network interface. It tells and here we are. It's over 20 years later, and that's what I now own.
That's so cool. No, that is so cool. It is funny because I'm a product manager now, and you were there before, and we were like, yeah, we'll get to the developer relations.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, but I mean, all of it's platformy stuff, Damien. My very first job at Microsoft was developer tools. And I had come from a company that sold developer tools, and that's the reason why Microsoft Canada hired me, was because they needed somebody who knew about developer tools. And once you get into Microsoft, everything is about developers. The company is first and foremost a platform company. And when it comes down to Windows, I mean, the developer piece of it, I worked on the platform components that we use to bring television into Windows, and did a bunch of work with a thing called the broadcast PC, where we integrated a satellite card, which was, again, completely unheard of, into Windows, and built a program guide. We did that kind of work, and I did a bunch of work on a home networking technology called Universal Plug and Play, which nobody knows about. But Universal Plug and Play is the reason why devices on your network can find other devices, because they all broadcast profiles of what they are. And it's the reason why when you go and open a tunnel out of the internet for an application, you don't have to go and manually program the router for that. The application can do that. It can talk to the router if it's a UPnP router and do it. And so it's a piece of infrastructure which is pretty critical. And my team, there were 12 of us, I think. We built an industry consortium, the Universal Plug and Play Forum, and we recruited all kinds of creators of devices to participate in it. We had 700 companies in it at its height. We created device profiles for printers and for routers and for light switches, all the stuff that you think about as being network devices in your home today. The genesis of that was work that we did around this Universal Plug and Play Forum. That was very much an ecosystem and developer kind of play, right? And from Microsoft, I went out to QNX, which was an operating system company that built a microkernel OS that was in the embedded space. And we were doing very similar things, tool chains, and getting software vendors to build against that. And I did that for about a year, and then from there I went to a telecom company. A bit of history: the U.S. telecom network in 1996 was AT&T was broken up, and the telecom network was mandated to be open, and every telecom player had to go out and open their network so others could build applications that ran on the public telephone network. So the company I went to built a platform with an API that you could use to build calling card, that you could use to build contact center, that you could use to build long distance workarounds, you could use to route calls in different ways. And we sold those to all kinds of small telephone companies. The big problem at the time was that if you wanted to go and build an application on a telecom network, you were going to buy a $5 million switch from Nortel, and then you're going to buy a $5 million application server and a $5 million media server, and you're going to be in for $15-20 million. And we could build that thing that could handle multiple phone calls and so on for anywhere from $30,000 to $200,000, depending on how many lines you had configured for it. So all of a sudden, all these little players flooded into the market.
Wow.
Because it's really cool. Built a startup, did that for 8 years. IOTM, the whole idea behind IOTM was I had a taste of what you could do with open telecom. And we built a web-based conferencing application. for that purpose. And then, as you know, where you and I met, I ended up going to BlackBerry. I left that company in 2011. BlackBerry needed to build a developer ecosystem, and I recruited some people that you know well, my old friend Bob Taniguchi, who I'd worked with at Microsoft on this stuff, and a few others, and took the BlackBerry team that was there in it already, and we built an evangelism organization, which you were part of, that BlackBerry had never had before, modeled on the stuff that I had worked with people at Microsoft on, and we built the solution architect organization, and we brought in the marketing parts of it, and well, that was the most fun I've had in a long time. That particular launching that platform and recruiting that developer ecosystem was heartbreaking when it ended, but it was thrilling doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. You go through adversity, right?
Yeah. No. Where are you at now? Like after BlackBerry, what happened?
I called up people I'd known at Microsoft and said, have you got anything? And an old friend of mine who was coincidentally running the Windows developer ecosystem said, Windows Mobile said, well, I mean, what do you want to do? And I said, the only thing I can't work on is another mobile OS, because BlackBerry had a non-compete agreement in place with me. So I went and joined that startup team. Yeah. And coached startups and worked with a couple of hundred of the best founders that I've ever met around the world, coaching them on everything from their business plans to how to present successfully. You probably don't know this, but I have some background. My dad was a drama teacher and a stage actor, and so working on stage is something I've always sort of had in the family and understood how to do. And so I would coach these founders. I mean, you got 6 minutes on stage, man, to pitch your company and your product. We put tape marks on the floor. We refine the message. We teach them how to do the pitch. And I was relentless. I mean, at them over and over again. And you remember my whole model. You got 3 things: build a hook. You got 3 messages you got to get out there. What are they going to be? That whole awesome suck doesn't suck model that Rich Tong at Microsoft taught me in, I don't know, 95, 96. And we'd coach all these startup founders to pitch their companies that way. Some of them I'm still in touch with today. Pretty awesome. And we built go-to-market models to let them tap into the Microsoft sales force and sell through Microsoft. Did a couple of other things in between. And what I'm working on right now is building an ecosystem again that's focused on sustainability. We have new sustainability platforms coming to market, and I think this is the biggest challenge I've ever seen, Demian. I got to tell you, it is so cool. And just to give you an idea of how big this is, we are human civilization, humanity. 7.5 billion of us are going to try and switch away from fossil fuels to non-polluting sources of energy over the next 30 years. Electricity, or there might be, some nuclear involved there or whatever else, but we're going to do that. And we have to. It's an existential crisis. If we don't do this, we're not going to have an environment that we can live in anymore. The planet will still be here. People talk about saving the planet. The planet's going to be here. It's a big ball of rock floating in space, but there won't be any people living on it.
Yeah.
So that's the challenge. And at the same time as we're getting rid of that or changing out the source of energy, we're also going to, the biggest source of emissions is actually agriculture. It's eating things like meat. So we're going to also try to shift a significant amount of the agricultural industry towards manufactured proteins based on plants. And we humans have been hunting and eating animals for 200,000-300,000 years now. We're going to swap the bottom end of the protein value chain out with something else. And we're going to try and do all this in the next 30 years. And just for context, the last time we did an energy transition, it was from burning what the climate folks euphemistically call biofuels. You mean wood and dung. So in 1800, coal started to become a fuel that people used. And coal didn't peak until 1950. It took 150 years for coal to hit peak. We're going to try and do all of this and get rid of fossil fuels in just 30 years. It is a huge challenge, but it's a data problem. I ended up, so how did I get involved in this? This is a fun story. In the middle of COVID, I went on a driving vacation to Yosemite and to Glacier National Park. And on the way back, drove through, I forget the name of the park now, but it's a little park in the middle of Oregon, which has got some great fossil beds, and stopped in this little tiny town. I mean, and when we're talking about a little tiny town, it's out in the middle of the Oregon desert. It's got one dusty road going through the middle of it, one restaurant, a few, a hardware store, and that's about it. So we stopped and had lunch in the restaurant. And the guy sitting across the table from us, we struck up a conversation. I said, "What do you do?" Turns out that he was the guy who was in charge of quantifying for the state of Oregon all of their carbon emissions for the whole state. So I said, "Well, how do you do that?" And we started talking about it, and just turned out this is a giant data problem. It's a data problem. Computers are well suited to data problems. Okay, so we can solve this. Cloud for Sustainability that I'm working on right now is an ecosystem play. I described to you that we're going to try and do 7.5 billion people switching out their energy source. Microsoft can't do that. Nobody can do that all by themselves. The only way to make it work is to get an ecosystem of players on a common architecture, a common platform that they can work against, where we can enable every organization on the planet to have a more sustainable future.
Yeah, no, this is amazing. And I remember watching like Bill Gates documentary, and he was all about data and optimizing everything, and trying to find ways to make things cheaper and better. It's nice to, one thing that really impresses me, and something that I really, really admire in you, is that you are always excited about the next challenge. You're always like, it's like at one point it was like, with me, it was BlackBerry 10, this amazing OS and everything. And now it's like, how do you do that? Like, do you pick the thing you want, or like you become interested about the thing that's presented to you?
Well, I think early in your career, it's harder to just pick. You don't have that luxury. And at some point, you begin to say, what is it that I'm going to do that really, really engages me? And with BlackBerry 10, the reason why I took on that job, and everybody said, "You're crazy. That's not going to work." But I did it because I've been passionate about Canadian tech for a long time. I'm Canadian. I wanted there to be a tech industry there. And I looked at BlackBerry and I said, this is a platform problem. I understand platforms and developers probably better than most people in the Canadian market. And BlackBerry's making some fundamental mistakes here. And then I just started knocking on doors. I sent mail to people at BlackBerry. I talked to everybody I knew that was involved at BlackBerry. I went back to people that now, like my friend Linda Campbell, who I worked with at QNX in 2001, who was now at BlackBerry because BlackBerry bought QNX. I talked to them all. I said, this is what we got to do. And eventually, I got Mike Lazaridis and Dan Dodge's attention, and they said, okay, come and help us. And that's how that happened. And I just kept at that until I got the response that I wanted to hear. So it's persistence. And in this particular case, last year at about this time, I went to my boss and I said, I'm not sure there's anything that I want to do at Microsoft anymore. And I have developed a bad bread baking habit. I love doing it. And I was quite seriously saying, maybe I should retire and go and take, some lessons on how to run a bakery, go to a cooking school and become a baker. That would be fun, because I just wanted to do something different from what I had been doing. And my boss was a good guy. He said to me, all right, well, why don't you just go and figure out what you want to do? And sustainability was concerning me. That conversation I'd had a year earlier in Oregon was in the back of my mind. My girlfriend at the time, my fiance now, we're going to be married.
Congrats. Yeah.
She was also working in sustainability. She had actually just finished working on helping Amazon. She was an Amazon employee at the time, put out their first sustainability report. She's a finance professional. and she was working on something else like that. And so I thought, maybe I should dig into that one a little bit more because I eat vegan, which I didn't back in the day when you knew me, but I switched my diet about 5 years ago. I drive an electric car, again because I'm really concerned about the amount of emissions coming from my car. And so I was already sort of walking the walk. I'd gotten rid of everything that was fossil fuel built inside my day-to-day life. And I thought, oh, well, what else is there to do? So I did a bunch of grad school courses and, online because it was in the middle of COVID. And I read a bunch of books. I can heartily recommend Energy and Civilization by Václav Smil. Fascinating book. It'll tell you some really cool stuff about sustainability. I read all of the IPCC reports that I could find. And the more I read, the more I thought, there's a problem here. There's a real big problem. We have an issue that we need to deal with. And at the same time, I talked about 7.5 billion people in this massive transition. You know what? That is a business opportunity, my friend. That is a huge business opportunity. That is bigger than anything that we have ever seen or likely ever will see in our lives. Maybe bigger than anything that the world has ever seen. And so it's a big, hairy problem to solve. And I started saying, okay, all right, who's working on this? And I banged on doors. I went around and talked to everybody that I could at Microsoft that was working on this. I know where the people are. We are a very green company. I found the people, for example, that collect all of the cooking fat from the kitchens that we have and use that to make the soap that we use in our bathroom. So we make our own soap. We're in the middle of digging a hole in the ground in the middle of the old campus and putting a geothermal energy plant in there to power the entire campus instead of, using fossil fuels. And almost all of our data centers are run from renewable energy now. The only thing that we have left to do really in most of them is get rid of the gas-powered backup generators for when the power goes out. So we've been working on this stuff, and I went and talked to everybody I could find. And I talked to VCs because I know a pile of VCs from my previous life. And I talked to other people in other companies and joined networking groups to talk to people who were thinking about sustainability. And eventually, I found a guy at Microsoft who said, I have a platform and an ecosystem that I need to build. Okay, that's how to do that.
So I think the biggest lesson to learn here is that, like, when I joined BlackBerry, right, I was working for agencies my whole life, and then this was my first big corporate job, and I was thinking, oh my God, like in a very immature way, I was like, oh, there's like Alec as the VP, he's probably amazing, awesome, and then someone went to him and said, hey, join us, but you created the opportunity, right? So I think that's important to highlight that it's true to my career as well. Like everything that happened after like BlackBerry to me was I created the opportunities. I went for like and looked for that next opportunity. And it's not like,
Damien. I think it's very rare that an opportunity drops into your lap. I think you make the opportunity in most cases. There's an old saying that some people will say that person's lucky, and others will say, well, no, they made their own luck. And I think you make it.
Yeah, no. So let's as we navigate a huge first lesson, let's navigate through time here. So I'm curious about some of the decisions that you made along the way. So first of all, let me share my screen here. And this is Brian and I, like when we joined.
Two guys.
And there's so much coolness here, right? So pretty young dudes, super hungry for challenges. And you guys gave us the opportunity, right? And there was a huge risk. Like, who knew? Like, we did super well, but we could be crazy and do something really bad. But you guys trusted us. Like, yeah, go do what you believe it's the right thing to do. And we did. At one point, we did 15 hackathons in like 3 months all across Latin America. And you're like, oh, with Red Bull as a sponsor, yeah, go do it. Like,
but you know what, Damien? First of all, you did an amazing job on those. I mean, the stuff that you guys were doing, you just said, oh, all right, they'll let us do it. Let's go do it. and I'm a huge believer in people. I think you push decision making as low as you possibly can in the organization. You remember that I also said to you all that you have a budget you can spend every month on anything that you think is necessary to go and achieve the goals you have. So you signed up for the goals. You told me what you were going to do. You got a budget to go do it, and then you went and did it. And you're going to make mistakes, sure, but the amount of time that it would take me to go and verify that you were doing exactly everything the way I thought it should be done, um, as opposed to, oh, the odd mistake gets made and we got to go do some cleanup and everybody gets to learn from it. It's a huge, huge, huge difference in energy. So I do not believe in command and control structures. I believe in giving people the ability and tools that they need to execute on the plan that they've agreed to, and then getting out of the way. And that's the best way to do things, I think. No, I mean, we all can sit down and we can have a conversation of what that plan should be. And I'm more than willing to offer feedback. And I like to know what the plan is in advance so I can help to guide it. But at the end of the day, agree on what you're going to do and then get out of the way and let people do it.
That's so
That's what
awesome.
you guys did. And I've operated that way my entire career. And it's an interesting, I think we go through a progression in management. You're an individual contributor, and the next thing you are is a manager, where you're responsible for the day-to-day tasks of somebody. And then the next thing after that, the next growth place is you're a leader, where you help people to manage their own time and objectives, and you remove roadblocks to them getting work done. And I don't want to be a manager. One of the things I've learned about me is that I am clinically ADD. It's really hard for me to manage projects with individual items. The best work I've ever done is when there's been organized people around me, that are, because I'm good at setting the direction. I'm good at the leading piece of it. I'm good at helping to guide things. I'm not good at looking at the individual line items of what somebody's doing and deciding whether or not that's the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do. And I don't want to do it. I just think it's not useful, and and in many cases it's unhelpful for the boss to get in there and try and micromanage things. So I
That's
don't.
no, that's wonderful to hear. And again, I joined BlackBerry because I was struggling with my agency in 2010, and then I went to Vegas, and I was, again, I don't know if it's luck or destiny, but me and my friend, we won that hackathon in Vegas with AT&T, and then that was the start. BlackBerry was sponsoring, and here I had a lot of experience participating in hackathons, and now I have a mission to attract developers with good budgets and freedom to execute, right? And that was amazing. We really, that was probably the best time of my career in terms of creating things and influencing people and meeting new people, right? And we traveled. I remember another question that I have for you, that's I don't know how you did that, but I think it was month 4 or 5 after I joined, and there was a BlackBerry Gen in Asia. It was China and India, and I was tasked to be there presenting, and we went there together. And then there was I was there with a bunch of amazing people, vice president, you were there, and I was like, okay, this is a super important guy. Let's do everything right. And then we went to take a walk on the streets, and then this happened. I don't know if you remember, but I was like, and I was like,
I do. Sarim made me sit for that photo, and I have it too.
like how he has everything to lose here, right? He's a vice president. He's holding a cobra. If something happens, and I don't know, something quick happens there, it's done. But now that I know more of you and everything, you just see you spend energy on the energy they would spend on plan B, you spend on plan A. That kind of attitude, and always seeing the best in opportunities. And what was going through your mind here? Did you feel any kind of fear here, or was I was only seeing the goodness.
I mean, I was a little nervous, but the assumption that I had was they probably do this with a lot of tourists. It can't be that dangerous.
Oh my god. Probability, yeah.
Yeah, but generally speaking, you know, you can choose to go through life looking at everything as a risk, or you can choose to go through life looking at things as opportunities. And you know, we all have a comfort zone, and we all blend that back and forth into how it is that we behave. Um, and I just encourage people to find their own comfort zone and then push a little more, take a little bit of an extra risk, because that's when growth happens. When you get outside your comfort zone and you're forced to do things that you haven't done before and learn from them. If we all go through life just doing the same thing over and over and over again, then you know we'll get to the end of our days and we'll just been a machine in the world. But
Yeah,
we go through the life with the mindset of an explorer, you know, the mindset of a of growth, and are willing to take some risks. Great things can happen. Great things. I'm not saying take unnecessary risks. You know, I'm saying take measured risks. I'm a scuba diver. Did you know that?
no, nice.
Yeah. So the scuba diver's motto, because you can die underwater, is plan your dive, dive your plan. And so what ends up happening with, you know, the most common dive accidents occur when somebody hasn't safety checked their equipment and has veered off the course of what it was that they were going to do when they're down. But if you're reasonably measured about your plan and stick to it, everybody can dive safely and see some
Yeah,
amazing things. And
that's
to
so
me, that's
cool.
the attitude of the world. It's just what do you need to do to have an amazing and rich life?
Yeah, no, this is super true. Thanks for clarifying. And yeah, I was like, I always thought like if this guy, the Cobra guy here, if something bad happens, he will run away. And here we are, like in India, and like he'll probably. But it was like, yeah, he did it. I was like, oh, I will never do it. But even now, I was like, yeah, that was I think the first big was like, wow, this guy is bold. Yeah,
He's crazy. Well, but do you remember? Do you remember when we did the launch and I jumped off the top of the Stratosphere Hotel?
in Vegas, yeah.
Terrifying. It was terrifying. I mean, I got down to the bottom and I was just, my knees were wobbly, and you know, it's just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I just did that. That was way scarier than the Cobra.
Wow. No, that's amazing. Another thing that I brought here was when we announced that we're gonna do the 12,000 devices for developers. Right, I have a quick video of that.
As a reward for your unprecedented efforts, we're building 12,000 new limited edition BlackBerry Z10s just for you. Would you guys like to see what these look like? I happen to have one.
And it was so impressive. I worked for Adobe and BlackBerry, did a lot of talks and everything, and I remember like a lot of people when they go through this part of like showing things that you're holding with your hands, a lot of people are shaking and like they're showing that they're under threat. um how did you deal with this big stage, like in terms of like what was happening in your mind? Like I'm so
Yeah.
curious about that and how you see that challenge.
So that's a good question. A lot of people have nerves when they got on stage. And it's not like I don't have nerves. I sure do have nerves. Um, the way that I deal with stage speaking is to rehearse. And I rehearse relentlessly. You know, some people will go and give a speech with bullet points. If it's a one-time speech like this, I've got it on a teleprompter, and I've probably run through it with the crew at least 4 or 5 times, and then I have also run through it myself another 15, 20 times.
Wow.
I'm sure that people got tired of hearing me give that speech if they were on the other side of my hotel room, for example, because if you had been standing outside my door, you would have heard that speech being given. And that just works for me. Some people are very comfortable doing it in a different way, but that's what I do. And I find that rehearsal and getting familiar with the message and the cadence of the words, because there's always a different way that you can say things, right? I mean, I have this wonderful T-shirt which says, it's got two bears and it says, commas matter. And on one of them, there's no comma, and it says, let's eat Bob. And they've got, the two bears are sitting down to eat this guy whose name is Bob. And on the one right below it, it says, let's eat Bob. And just a pause, because there's a comma in there. And the two bears are sitting at the table with food set on the table with them, and Bob is sitting at the table with them, right? And so that whole process of intonation and understanding the way that you say the words and how you say the words and where the emphasis is, I find that for me anyway, I can't go on stage and do that without rehearsing it. And in general, in life, I find that I'm best when I think about things and prepare a bit in advance as opposed to trying to wing it. You can always tell when someone's winging it. You can always tell. They stumble over the words, the sentences don't make any sense, those sorts of things. So in this particular case, yeah, my hand wasn't trembling. I had probably held that phone up at least 2 dozen times like that and shown it around. I had rehearsed with the camera crew where my hand was going to be and what angle it was going to be holding it so they could get the best shot. That's a good shot, isn't it? All that stuff leading up to it. And I believed in those presentations. I was the VP of ecosystem and developer at Microsoft. At BlackBerry. But really, what I was the chief evangelist. And when you get out on stage and you're trying to engage a room full of 1,500 developers, and you want them to believe, and you want them to come along with you on the trip, you have to be all there, all the time, engaged, passionate about what you do, and articulate with the message.
That's very, very impressive. And I interviewed more especially athletes, and when you mentioned that it's important to get familiar with that situation when they go to Olympics or when they go to like a national challenge, or like in the case of one of our interviews, Michi Brusco, he just won an X Games medal in Japan, his second. And it's always like he's not gonna do something new there. It's almost he's gonna do that thing that he did multiple times before, right? And it's more about putting your mind into, okay, you've done this, you can do this, you practice, you know what needs to be done, and then things happen, right? You're gonna default to what you master. That's why that were the conclusions that I'm getting with these interviews. So that's super awesome.
But it's 100% right. And whether it's athletics, or whether it's performing on a stage, or whether it's music, you get into a zone, and you can't reach the zone unless you've practiced it and mastered it first.
It's awesome.
You're a surfer. I know that you spend time surfing over and over again. You don't go to those competitions and say, you know what? I'm here to surf today. First time I've done it. You just don't. I know you don't.
Yeah, that's very important to practice. That's critical. Another thing that I have here is something that I love, and I didn't see after you, like being done in the developer world, like at least those clips that we had, like, and you were like singing this song. And now that I learned that you did music in the past and music is a part of your life, that makes a lot more sense. But let's watch and then we can talk about that.
Sure.
We've all seen these are challenging times, baby, 'cause we're in transition. A whole new mobile computing platform, maybe one tough proposition. led. The launch is just ahead. We'll have BlackBerry 10, both in full touch and quality editions. And though I know you're all wondering when, it won't be forever. Plus, there's new stuff for you to use until then, and it all flows together. And I meant every word I said when I said that your apps will make BlackBerry better than ever. And we're gonna keep on loving you. Our updated SDK is really cool. The API's complete. We just wanna keep on loving you. And I meant every word I said when I said that I'm dead to the heart of the modern endeavor. And we're gonna keep on loving you. Our updated SDK is really cool. The API's complete. We just wanna keep on loving you. Baby, we gonna keep on loving you. Our updated SDK is really cool. The API's complete. We just wanna keep on loving you.
It's a lot longer than I remembered it. Where did you find that?
A lot of research, but it's like I was so impressed when and it brought me so many amazing memories. It was this full commitment to, I want to do my job. I want to create emotions because emotions will probably attract more people. And yeah, you did it. So how this whole project happened, and I don't know if people noticed, but pretty much everyone was a regular employee, not like a musician, right? Like,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
It came about because one of the things I used to love, when you see a lot of corporate conferences, they open the keynote with a sizzle reel, they call it. And that sizzle reel is often, some loud music and some snappy images and whatever else. And I just didn't like them. I thought they were boring. I remembered, years ago in the early days of Microsoft, Bill and Steve used to put together these really funny videos that they would open things up with. There's one where they're driving around in a Volkswagen singing that song, da, 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 and so they had a real sense of humor and poked fun at themselves. And, it always got a laugh from the audience. It always engaged them. So I went to our creative team and I said, I want to do something like that. And we brainstormed a bunch of ideas. And they said, well, we could do a music video. That could be fun. And it hooks into, my very first talk at BlackBerry at one of our developer events. Before we called them BlackBerry Jam, we used to call them DevCon. I introduced myself and I said, I was attracted to building code because building code, I had a background in music, and building code and music are kind of similar. They're both mathematically oriented. They're both creative endeavors and so on and so forth. And I asked, how many of you in the room are musicians? And I swear 3/4 of the room put their hands up. So I thought, okay, that's pretty interesting. And then we named the conference Blackberry Jam. And it was a pun on the word blackberry and jam because it's food, but it's also a pun on a jam session. And we talked about this with the developers as, you know what, these are like jam sessions. You can come together with us, you can work to us, and you can get things done together. And so it was just natural at that point when somebody said, we should do a music video. So I was like, oh, yeah, that fits. That's perfect. That actually makes a ton of sense. And so we did it. And, that was Marty Malik on the keyboards. And that was Chris Smith on the guitar. And Chris actually plays in a grunge band in his
Oh,
spare.
nice.
He's loved doing that. And the place where that video was shot was a warehouse that we had in Waterloo that we used to keep product at. And it was at that point. And so we went in there, we hired a camera crew. That camera crew, they had just come from filming CeeLo's latest video in Nashville, CeeLo Green. And they came up and they filmed 3, middle-aged BlackBerry vice presidents singing goofy lyrics about developers. And the coolest thing about that, Damien, it went viral.
Yeah.
500,000 hits in 24 hours. News organizations picked it up and they made fun of us and whatever else. But the developer community that it was for, they loved it. They thought it was so cool that we put ourselves out like that.
Yeah, I never saw it as a bad thing. I was really like, oh my god, these guys don't care, like, and they want to, as I said, do their job, get to the right audience, and that was accomplished, right? We went from, I don't know, like 3,000 developers to like 300,000, and like it was.
The actual final number was around 80,000, but still, it was huge. I mean, and we had the largest developer community recruited from scratch and the most number of applications on a new platform than anybody had ever had. Anybody.
Yeah.
It was a real accomplishment. And I mean, we all saw it as a good thing. It was funny because BlackBerry's corporate marketing people, suit and tie folks, very on brand. Oh my gosh.
What is happening?
They went to the CEO and they complained bitterly. They said, you have to yank this guy. And luckily for me, Heidi Davidson, exec VP of PR, she says, no, this is good. This is really good. And she talked everybody down, and I'll be forever grateful to her for that. That was just fantastic.
No, that's amazing. No, that was such a good thing. Yeah, and I brought more things here that were super powerful and like that. I think. Let me get to the. Remember this one?
Actually giving you that perfect moment.
Like to tap on the face and then go back in time, and like all these different things that BlackBerry had, that it was so amazing. Yeah, great times. Thank you so much for mentoring me and really being like the leader of the whole org. It was probably the best time of my evangelist career as a developer evangelist. Traveled the world, visited many countries. I was able to propose to my wife in Paris because we had the BlackBerry Jam Europe conference.
I remember. Yeah,
it was so nice. And like we always end these interviews with a question that's loaded, and I'm really curious to know what you see. So you had a lot of ups and downs. You always got super excited about everything. What is happiness to you, Alec, after going through all these different experiences today?
I feel like I have to be useful. I'm not happy just being. I have to be useful. I have to serve some larger purpose in the things that I do. And I didn't really understand that about myself until probably 5 years ago, 6 years ago. So that's an important piece of it. And I think that there are people who do work-life balance really well, who make time for different aspects of their life, and they have pieces that can work together. I mean, my marriage fell apart in part because I got so engaged with what was going on in the workplace. And I've learned that for me, I'm either all in or I'm not. And if I'm not all in, I don't feel useful, and I don't feel as if the contribution I'm making makes any kind of a difference. And I need to feel like what I'm doing is making a difference. Everybody's going to have something different, Damien. Everybody's going to have something different, but that's what makes me tick.
That's awesome. Yeah, wow, a lot of good learnings here again. Thank you so much for your time, your wisdom, and yeah, for sharing your stories with us. And it was good to see these things again and remember like our good days of BlackBerry.
Yeah, thank you. That was a lot of fun. You showed me things that I haven't seen in a long time.
It was like
Good
10
for you.
years ago, 10 years ago almost now. Yeah.
And just to close out, I want the last word here.
Yeah.
I'm super happy when you asked me if I wanted to do this. I think more than a lot of people that I've ever met in my life, Damon, you embody that. Okay, let's just go for it. And I remember having conversations with people in other parts of the team and so on. People saying, "What is Damien doing now?" It's incredible. And that's who you are. And so I admire that about you, and keep doing that. It's a great, great, great characteristic to have.
Thank you so much. Yeah, as you grow old and like have kids and everything, things slow down. But yeah, like that fire is still here, and thanks for all the support along the years.
All right.
Thank you so much, Alec. Thanks everyone for watching. And yeah, we'll compile everything and it'll be recorded. Thanks, Alec.
Wonderful. Bye-bye.